There we go. Welcome in, everybody. George Stoya, Eddie Radosevich. Josh will be joining us here shortly. We're here. We're here on Sunday night. Welcome back to the Soonerscoop.com YouTube page. And Jeff Lebby is headed to Mississippi State. George, it's something that we had talked about it in the Instant Reaction show on Friday afternoon. I almost said Saturday. On Friday afternoon. And today was a whole bunch of waiting, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was a weird day.
Well, it's one of those things that I think when you go through these coaches' searches or, either side of it, really, whether, going through the Lincoln Riley stuff or like we did today, something's happening. It's kind of like Brent Venables and waiting at the airport to get him back here, on that Sunday night when everything went down with Brent. But Jeff Lebby, it's officially official. We can talk about it in regard of Oklahoma's looking for an offensive coordinator, which is kind of crazy to talk about. Let's just go with Should
we start with the timeline of events?
Yeah, exactly. Let's do that.
So from what I know, it started really heating up Wednesday. That's when Jeff.
This is the day before Thanksgiving.
Yes, yeah. Jeff interviewed for the job. That was his first interview for it. Obviously, the connection to Zach Selman, the athletic director there now at Mississippi State, interviewed on Wednesday. It really started to heat up then. I think that's when reports started to come out.
I think that's something that we talked about on the Unofficial 40 as well, just in terms of initially, I didn't think this was ever going to be a thing. I really didn't.
No.
I didn't think that I didn't think that Mississippi State was going to go in this direction. But ultimately, that won out. And continue with your timeline. Josh, how's it going? We'll get to you here shortly. We're going over the timeline.
Yeah, I'll wait.
Events.
I got my time. This is George's show right now.
Yeah, so Wednesday he interviewed for the job. We asked about it Friday after the game, like we had to.
Right.
There
were some alarm bells that went off just with his answer, Jeff's answer, as well as Brent's answer on Friday afternoon in the postgame.
Yeah, no, I mean, they were very coy about it. There was no denial from either of them. And so that's when we really started looking into it. And then things really got interesting Saturday night. And that's when, I found out that he had been offered the job, talked to several people, and it sounded like it was clearly heading in that direction that he was going to take it. But we didn't know for sure. And even as far as this afternoon, I was told that he had not informed anyone inside the building that he was leaving. In fact, I tweeted that out. No more than 15 minutes later, the same person says, "Hey, he just told us." So it happened pretty quickly. Now, I think that he started to put together what he wants his staff to look like. We can get into that some in a little bit, but this happened rather quickly. I don't think any of us expected it to happen this quickly. You and I talked about it, Eddie. When it first came up, his name was listed a couple weeks ago for the job, and we're like, we don't know if Jeff would be interested in that. Obviously, he was, and it's hard to turn down, an SEC head coaching job. So now Oklahoma has to look somewhere else, which I think they're going to look internally. But there's also some external candidates out there too. We can get into that a little bit later.
No doubt about it. And I think that the first things are first here as we move forward now. Oklahoma's looking for an offensive coordinator. Brent Venables looking to make a hire at offensive coordinator.
Yeah.
For, what seems like it's just kind of crazy how this stuff happens so quickly. 2 years. It doesn't seem like Jeff Lebby was here that long, but it also seems like he was here for a long time. Josh, let's go on the recruiting side of things. Just in terms of, because I know we want to get to the offensive coordinator and what's going to happen there, but immediate reaction from some of the guys that you've talked to in terms of the 2024 class. I know that we've talked to some of the guys in the 2025 class as well. It would seem that there's not any just major meltdown is probably how I would categorize it as we move along here in the Sunday night.
Yeah, guys, you compare this to the last real coaching change, and we all know who that was and what happened there and how immediate that all felt. I mean, I remember us talking about it that day, and it was just clear that there was a lot that was going to transpire. I'm not hearing that right now. There's no question. There's some guys that are going to go back and think about things and want to know who the next OC is going to be, what that's going to look like, what offense they'll run. All the completely valid questions that a young guy's going to have, but I don't get any impression that there's anybody that's big alarm bells are going off for anyone. I've talked to, Brendan Zurbrugg basically told me, the quarterback commitment from Ohio he just said, as long as Coach V's there, I'm good. I know what I'm doing. And that's huge for Oklahoma. When you look at, we know how limited that quarterback room is going into 2024. So it's really Jackson Arnold, and then you don't know what else will even be there. So Oklahoma needs those guys to stick. Michael Hawkins, my impression of that is a little more open-ended. I think there is definitely some affinity for the Seth Luttrell possibility. Again, you have to remember, Michael's father was at Oklahoma, knows, has some familiarity with Seth, even beyond just his ability as a coach and, what they've got, how they've gotten to know him over the last 6-7 months since he arrived on campus, or I guess 10 months now. I kind of misplacing that, but I like where Oklahoma is there as well. Kevin Sperry, I think, being the youngest guy, you kind of wonder, okay, what's that going to look like, what that response is going to be. But this is a kid that moved to Oklahoma. Like, I just struggle to believe that he's going to be some dramatic change. I think that they have a real bond with Brent Venables. I think that's probably going to win out. But like I said with Hawkins, they're going to need to answer some questions, and I think they'll be fine long as Brent makes a good hire. I would expect, the primary recruits for Lebby, which of course are the quarterbacks, to stick with Oklahoma.
Well, I think that probably leads into the question that is the big question mark out there, and that is what happens with Jackson Arnold. Just either one of you, your overall take. I get the impression from people I've talked to today, there really isn't any concern that Jackson Arnold is going to be Oklahoma's quarterback in 2024 and into the future.
I will say I've spoken to some people close to Jackson, and that is fully the expectation. Now, I'm sure the hire will mean something, right?
Sure.
Like it won't mean nothing, but I would, unless they go out there and just hire somebody totally out of the blue that we've never heard of and would be a bad hire, then I expect Jackson to be the quarterback at Oklahoma next year.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I just, and again, it's not solely, it's got nothing to do with their relationship. Jeff Lebby and Jackson Arnold, we all know that's a good, strong relationship. Jeff recruited him, and really, I think people forget, was in on Jackson Arnold before a lot of people realized how special Jackson Arnold was. I mean, he wasn't the guy that was a 5-star as a sophomore. I mean, Lebby knew that was his guy, stuck with him, and we all kind of watched Jackson Arnold rise thereafter. But no, there's nothing to tell me that that's going to be an issue or anything like that. And frankly, guys, we don't really know what Jeff Lebby's going to handle this like. Is he going to take the Brent Venables approach of, I'm not going to touch anybody at Oklahoma, anybody that was connected to that, I'm not going to mess with that. Honestly, I kind of expect that with, the respect I know Lebby has for Brent, if that will carry over. I mean, that's an interesting conversation, but I just don't see him being a guy that tries to raid Oklahoma on his way out the door.
In terms of that, George, I would expect some people within the program to go with Jeff Lebby down to Starkville. Josh, and would love to hear your thoughts on this as well. I think everybody kind of points to Joe John Finley, what that situation looks like. Does he take anybody from the offensive staff with him? That's going to be really interesting to see moving forward. How do you guys kind of envision this going down?
From what I've heard, there's already several, quality control analyst type position coaches that will be going with Jeff. Now, in terms of position coaches, I don't think there will be a ton of movement there. Joe John Finley is the obvious name, very close with Jeff. Someone that has worked with him previously at UCF, I believe. And so, I think that he's one that, he could end up being a co-offense coordinator. I think he could also get promoted to that role here at Oklahoma. That's some of the speculation out there right now, is that he could very well be in a position to maybe be a co-offensive coordinator in Norman as well. So we'll see. It also is interesting, Devon Mitchell tweeted out, we'll get into the recruit stuff too, but Devon Mitchell tweeted out that, he's sticking with Oklahoma, which makes you think maybe he's already heard something about, Joe John's potential future in Norman too. So, but right now, all that I've heard is that it's, a handful of quality control type coaches that could be following Jeff and possibly getting, bigger roles at Mississippi State.
Sure. And, I would imagine that a bunch of those names are names that you probably out there aren't just terribly familiar
Correct.
with, but they're people that, have big parts of the program and day-to-day stuff that, some of these coordinators and some of the position coaches, they kind of lean on throughout the week to help game plan and prepare and all that kind of stuff. And it'd be a great opportunity for any of those guys. I remember, was it Ty Darlington that was part of the program and then ended up going out, and now he's at Incarnate Words. So, Josh, just in terms of kind of your overall feel for the any of the coaches that might leave, or do you stay around and you see what is here at Oklahoma as they make the move into the SEC?
Yeah. I hate to sound like so repetitive with what George said, but I think he covered it well. Like,
right.
There's just not a lot of reason to believe that a lot of this staff is going to leave because, guys, we know a lot of this staff, including Joe John Finley. I think if he was somewhere other than Oklahoma, Joe John would absolutely be following Jeff Lebby to Mississippi State. There's a question here. Joe John Finley likes it in Norman. There's a lot of connection there. So I don't think that is the no doubt dead ringer for a choice that you would say in almost 99 times out of 100 other situations. But I mean, if you made me pick, I would guess that's probably what he ends up doing. He becomes the OC. But I don't see anybody on that staff that you say, okay, that's absolutely the case, because, and that's what's so interesting when Lebby came in, is he was an offensive coordinator that didn't come in and say, okay, I'm rebuilding this. Bill Bedenbaugh was already there. DeMarco Murray was already there. Emmett Jones is an interesting one. But, guys, I've got to think with the early returns on Emmett Jones, the way the receivers have played, the recruiting, I've got to think Brent Venables is going to do everything he can to make sure Emmett Jones is on that staff next year.
100%. And, again, another guy that tweeted out, immediately was Zion Kearney, the wide receiver he's in the 2024 class, right? Great player. He tweeted out, again, maybe that's a sign of he's already heard from some of the staff about, who's staying, who's not, and those sort of things. But I think you're right, Josh. I wouldn't be shocked if OU, loses no one from the offensive staff. I mean, it would not be a surprise at all to me. Josh, I wanted to ask you, though, the name everybody's already circled, at least a lot of people have, and I know he's going to be a candidate, is Seth Littrell. What kind of connections does Seth Littrell have in any of this recruiting wise, and what do you maybe know about him as an offensive play caller?
Yeah, the buzz I've heard that is probably most interesting to me is with Michael Hawkins. Like I've heard he has impressed, Hawk, his family. And again, you have to remember, with Dad being there in 2002, Seth, not long before, there's a lot of overlap in people they're going to know and familiarity that they have with each other. So I think that is meaningful. And I would expect if Littrell is hired, I would be very surprised if Michael Hawkins batted an eye. Like, I think he'd just move forward and again, I don't want any of this to come across as, oh, they didn't love Jeff Lebby or anything like that. They did. But I think Seth Littrell, and you guys could speak probably better to it than I can. I think he's really impressed a lot of people, and it not surprisingly. I mean, he's a former head coach. I mean, there's a lot of skins on his wall, so like we get it. But at the same time, I think even in that short time, people have liked him. Yeah,
I think he keeps Copenhagen in business, which I respect. I do.
I think Seth would be a pretty good hire. I know there's a lot of people out there like you got to go external, and there's some good candidates out there. Willie Korn at Liberty is one that
let's talk about the you put up a hot board up on Soonerscoop.com. Just some names that I think a lot of people probably go, yeah, duh, when they see it, but they are very familiar. And there's a lot of options that are currently on staff. And if you look at how Dabo has handled things, I'm not saying that that's how Brent's going to handle things, but I think that there is some, symmetry or whatever you want to call it there between the way that Brent has run his program as opposed to the way that Dabo did. And obviously the time spent in Clemson probably has kind of come to that, right?
Yeah.
I think, sorry, George, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
I think there is. I mean, there's some clear connection. And honestly, people kind of say, well, what do you think he'll do? Well, we don't have any track record. There's no obvious sign of like, well, how will Brent handle this? We've seen how Bob handles it. We know that has a role in the way Brent looks at things. We've seen how Dabo handles things, and we know that has a role in things. And even Bill Snyder. I mean, like, and those are three guys that believe in loyalty. They want to keep things as simple as they can. They really only blow things up when they have to. Like you look at, the hiring of Lincoln Riley under Bob, like that was really a forced, this is not where it needs to be. It's got to be better. Okay, we're going to start from scratch and kind of rebuild everything. So I would think that Brent's preference would be to keep a guy like Seth Luttrell, but there's a lot of interesting options out there, guys. I mean, we've talked about some, and George has got a hot board up on Sooner Scoop for anybody that wants to look at it. But, there are a lot of interesting names out there, and I don't want to get into any of the guys that were on George's board, but a guy that I think is really interesting that has some connection to the state and to a lot of coaches really in Texas and Oklahoma is Brennan Marion at UNLV, coaching under, Barry Odom out there, runs that go-go offense. And I don't know, people may kind of say, oh, that's kind of gimmicky, and I know that was something that maybe upset people at times with Lebby, but you can't argue the productivity. I mean, like UNLV is putting up points on everybody and is doing it with, let's be honest, a too deep, basically a personnel grouping on offense that wouldn't make Oklahoma's too deep. So, I mean, like you have to kind of respect what they're doing. But there's a lot of interesting options. I'd love them to take a look at the Kotelnicki guy at Kansas. I think we all saw firsthand how talented he is. So there's a lot of good options, but it really is. It's a question of how Brent wants to look at this.
Do you want me to run through these?
Yeah, I was going to say, and we could maybe outside of the three that we obviously know, Seth Luttrell, Matt Wells, Joe John Finley. They're three guys that are currently on staff. Obviously, Joe John is the only actual position coach, with Seth Luttrell and Matt Wells being basically analysts, I think is what it comes down to. But some of the other names that you threw out there, George.
Willie Korn from Liberty. He is one of the hottest names in all of college football right now. I think he's even been mentioned for some, group of 5 head coaching jobs. And, if Chadwell ends up, leaving Liberty and taking another head coaching job, which sounds like he might, I would not be shocked if he's named the head coach at Liberty.
I was going to say, is that a situation too that, are you going to get back into some of the stuff that we had talked about with Jeff Lebby and trying to learn how to call an offense kind of a little bit on the run? I'm sure that Jamie Chadwell is pretty responsible for that offensive operation at Liberty. And do you get right back to like kind of square one if you were to go after a Willie Korn? I don't know. I'm just throwing it out there.
Yeah, no, I just think he's one of those names that's been mentioned everywhere. So he would make sense to maybe at least get an interview.
Sure.
If they end up doing the external route. They have the 5th best offense in the country right now, efficient wise. And so I think that he could definitely be on that list. The other one, Sean Lewis from Colorado, which, it's been a weird year for him because he left the Kent State. He was the head coach at Kent State, and then ended up leaving to be the offensive coordinator at Colorado. And then Dion, like a few weeks ago, decided to not let him call plays anymore, even though Colorado was one of the better offenses in the country when he was calling plays. They've since not been as good offensively. I think he's one of the brighter minds in college football. Was the offensive coordinator and quarterbacks coach at Syracuse a few years ago before being at Kent State. And then, like Josh said, Brennan Marion from UNLV, played wide receiver at Tulsa in 2009. Guy that knew his state. He coached at Oklahoma Baptist. That's actually kind of how he got back into college football coaching, was starting at Oklahoma Baptist. So he kind of knows the area. He coached at Texas actually in 2022. I believe as the passing game coordinator. So, again, kind of familiar with the area as somebody that, as a young guy, 36 years old, could go out and recruit. But, again, he kind of falls in that same category as Willie Korn. Doesn't have the same experience as maybe some other guys in terms of calling plays.
Josh, if you were going to go out and you had, it didn't matter who the guy was, you could go offer the job to anybody, who would you hire as the offense coordinator?
Oh, there's no doubt for me. It's Ryan Grubb at Washington. I love what they do offensively. Now, I would say a guy that doesn't get his credit, and we've talked a lot about one of his players, but Kirby Moore at Missouri, guys, what they've done with the quarterback situation there that looked awful at times last year, and he's made Brady Cook arguably the second best quarterback in the SEC behind Jaden Daniels. I mean, guys played really good football. I know he throws the Luther Burden and all of that, but there is a lot to like there. But Ryan Grubb would be if you're really going to go national and you're going to say we're going to hire anybody and we're going to pay whatever we need to pay, I make Ryan Grubb tell me no.
Sure.
Like, and this is a guy, and I know people say, well, he turned down Alabama last year. He did. You have to remember, though, Alabama wants to run Alabama's offense. They want Ryan Grubb to come in and run what they want to run, not what he's comfortable with. Now, he can make tweaks and he can do stuff, but Oklahoma, you've got to think at this point, it says, come in, do whatever you need to do, run it however you want to run it, and you look at the success. You know, guys, once – Kalen DeBoer left Michael Penix fell apart at Indiana. And now there's injuries and there's mitigating factors. There are, but then you push forward and you see how he's grown under Grubb and DeBoer again at Washington. Now, kind of like what George is talking about with Jamie Chadwell and Willie Corn. Where does Kalen DeBoer end? Where does Ryan Grubb start? That's a valid question. But to me, those are two guys. If you're really going to look at it and go nationally, those are guys I would be having a conversation with for sure.
We want to get into some questions from the
we
YouTube stream. Do we have quite a few? Are they?
We have over 1,000 people watching us live right now.
Good. I don't have that many family members, so I'm happy that there are some people out there that care about us.
I just hit like. I want everybody else to do the same. Guys, give us the likes. We need it. We need Subscribe. It for the algorithm. We want everybody watching us. We need all the attention.
Yeah, we'll get into 9/11 conspiracies in a little bit. What about the offensive coordinator stuff do we want to get into here? I'm open game. If you want to just read off some of the questions.
Cliff Kingsbury. I'll just throw some names out that have been thrown out in the chat.
I like this game. I like this game.
Cliff Kingsbury, yes, no,
maybe? I think from from a standpoint of headline grabbing, attention seeking, day-to-day fun that would be, hell yeah. Do I think it's a reality, a situation that is out there? No, absolutely not. What about you, Josh?
No, I agree completely. Now, you talk about a guy that if you make the hire, absolutely walks into any quarterback room in the country, as far as a high school recruit, and they're going to say, you coach the NFL. Yeah, man, I'll come play in your offense. I'll do what you want to do. But, yeah, there's nothing that makes that make sense. And, you talk about Brent loves to talk about, the complimentary football. You wonder how that works. And, guys, I'm one that wonders about the spread. I wonder about the future of it and how that fits, the Mike Leach offense. How does that look going forward? And obviously that has some conversation to go, that fits in with the Seth Luttrell possibility.
Lots of Cale Gundys in the chat.
I don't think that's an option.
I don't think so either.
But I would say that I don't know why it continues to, everybody's aware of the reason that everything kind of, shit hit the fan, for a lack of better terms, when he, was dismissed as wide receivers coach. You have to understand that, and then for you to ask that question again, it's like, see rule number one, the reason that everything, and you can debate if it was deserved or not. I mean, I think we've done that on the Unofficial 40 and on the board and everywhere else. It was a terrible situation, but I just don't see that being a reality. And on the flip side of it, I don't even know if Cale would want to come back and get into coaching. I think he's living a pretty good life right now with, kind of the ventures that he's in and being a part of the Sooner Club and everything that they have. I just don't think that's a realistic option.
Dana Holgerson.
Guys, I want. Oh, go ahead, Eddie, or go ahead, George.
I was just going to read off another name, Dana Holgerson, but go ahead with your thought.
I was going to say, guys, we talk about Seth Luttrell, and I think it's an interesting conversation because I like Luttrell. There's a lot of track record. I mean, you look at, some of his North Carolina offenses were very productive. Guys, he hasn't been the primary play caller since 2015. That's almost a decade. Like that. How do you weigh that? I'm not saying I'm against that idea. I'm saying it's something you kind of have to think about because, we know both as, the way recruiting and staff and personnel are handled has changed dramatically. but so is just the game in general. I mean, it's very different. And it's not to say that he hasn't been around it. I don't want to say he can't do the job. I don't want this to be painted like that. But at the same time, I think it's a valid question.
Yeah.
It'll also be interesting to see, in speaking of somebody like a Matt Wells and speaking of somebody like a Seth Luttrell, do they want to get back into head coaching jobs? I think that, I've heard that Wells would be interested in getting back in if the opportunity was right. I know that there's some interesting jobs that are out there right now, whether it be a San Diego State, whether it be, there's a number of quote unquote decent jobs out there that, the Houston job coming open today. Seth Luttrell, he's coached as, a head coach in the state of Texas. He kind of knows the ins and outs there. It'll be interesting to see which way a Houston goes and which way a San Diego State goes. Now, I don't think that Oklahoma's going to have to wait to make their move because, something that we talked about, George, who coaches in the bowl game? Like, would they just promote Seth Luttrell to be the offense coordinator in the bowl game? And that destination is unknown as we'll have to wait until a week from today for that bowl destination.
Yeah, I don't know what they're going to do in the bowl game. I think you could have any number of guys called up to call plays. If it ends up being that Seth is the guy that they're going to hire, then I would assume they will let him call the plays in the bowl game, kind of let his feet get wet and come up with some sort of plan for that. I don't know how quickly they can install an offense because the offense is different than what Jeff ran here. So I don't know what they'll do in the bowl game, but I do want to say, guys, I know we've gone through a lot of names. This is going to be a very attractive job. This is going to be one of the top, offensive coordinator jobs in the country available. So I don't think Oklahoma's going to have any trouble attracting people to get this job. It just comes down to this is a massive hire for Brent Venables, right? I don't know if we've said that yet. I mean, in terms of important positions on staff at the OU football program, it's head coach number 1 and offensive coordinator number 2. They have to hit. Brent has to hit this out of the park. I think he will.
Yeah.
And I think some of the guys we mentioned are really good options. But this is a massive, massive hire. I have no idea how quickly they'll get it done. I bet it's. From my understanding, on Saturday when they got the news that Jeff was offered the job, they already started looking into candidates, and they've already kind of. They have a list. Let's just say that. And I don't know how big the list is. I don't think it's very big. I think it's several names, and they'll go through it, including some that we mentioned internally. But I wouldn't be shocked if by the end of this week we know who's going to be the next offensive coordinator at Oklahoma.
Josh, how important is it for them to, with the way that the recruiting world works now, with the way that the transfer portal works now, how important is it for them to be pretty damn proactive on this and get something done in the next 4, 5, 6 days?
Honestly, and you guys know me in recruiting, I can tend to be an alarmist, but I think they can be okay. I think it's more about making the right hire. And part of that is what Brent talks about so much with these relational, the recruiting practice. And I think when you look at it, there aren't guys that say, okay, all I ever really talked to is Jeff Lebby. Like, okay, I know Emmett Jones. I know Bill Bedenbaugh. I know Brent Venables. Like, and even, you forget that you get guys at quarterback, like JP Lossman. Like, you go down the list of these guys that are familiar to these players. So I think that helps Oklahoma a lot, gives them a little breathing room. I don't get the impression that there's anybody that there's nobody that I'm like, okay, he's on decommitment watch. Like, I've got to be careful with him. I've got to stay in touch with him and make sure nothing happens here. There's nobody that sends up a real red flag to me. Devon Mitchell, you kind of wondered a little bit about, but he's we've seen his tweets. We mentioned them earlier. He acts like he's very solid. I think some of that, whether you could easily say, okay, that's because Joe John told him he's going to stay. I don't know that. We don't know that. But I do think he's had a chance to talk with Brent Venables. Guys, we know that they've been working the phones over the last, 8 to 12 hours, kind of catching up with these guys, making sure they know everything's going to be fine. They're going to find another OC. The wheels are going to keep turning. So I think they'll be fine. And I think the point is dead on. This is going to be one of the most coveted OC jobs in the country, not just because it's Oklahoma, guys. but because they have the guy. They have that guy that in 2 years' time, you can be the next Jeff Lebby. You go win with Jackson Arnold and you light up the scoreboard and Arnold becomes a Heisman finalist, which I think we all, I know that's crazy. The guy hadn't started a game yet, but we know that the physical ability and the spotlight that is on a program like Oklahoma, especially as they move to the SEC, if you go out there and put that guy in a good position and he makes plays and puts up huge numbers, there's no reason you're not a head coach in 2 years' time. So I think there is absolutely a lot of people beyond just the obvious choices that would be very interested in that situation. Even, I mentioned some of the high-profile names before, the Ryan Grubbs, the Kirby Moore, some of those kind of guys. Michael Penix ain't coming back to Washington. He's gone. So maybe Ryan Grubbs says, I can latch onto this guy, and then I'm my own boss in a couple of years, that kind of thing. So we'll see. But I couldn't agree more that based on what we can see out there right now, I can't imagine there's an offensive coordinator job in the country that would be more coveted.
Well, think about this. This is a wild stat, I guess, or something you can think about. Since the Stoops era, so 1998, 1999, every single offensive coordinator OU has had has gone on to be a head coach. Chuck Long, Mark Mangino, Mike Leach, Josh Heupel, who obviously was fired but went on to be a head coach, Lincoln Riley, and now Jeff Lebby. Every single one. So this is a job. You come to Oklahoma.
Kevin Sumlin. Don't forget Summing. He was in there too.
Exactly. So you come to Oklahoma and you be an offensive coordinator and you do a good job for, like you said, 2, 3, 4 years, however long, you're probably going to get a really good head coaching job. And think of where all those guys ended up going. I mean, they went to primarily Power 5 jobs other than, Chuck Long went to, I think, San Diego State. And then obviously, like I said, Josh Heupel was fired, but he ends up, being the Tennessee head coach. So,
I think it's worked out well for Josh.
Yeah, it's worked out well. So, again, you come to Oklahoma, you put that on your resume. I mean, it's still one of the best jobs in the country.
What about Jeff Grimes? Would that be too hard of a sell for Brent Venables to sell that to the fan base, being that, and if you don't know the news, Jeff Grimes was relieved of his duties today in Waco. He was fired by Dave Aranda, and I think it was probably a move that Dave Aranda had to save his own ass, so it was somebody else's. But I think that we've always been pretty fascinated with what Baylor's done offensively. I couldn't tell you what's gone on with that program this year. They were terrible. I mean, they finished the season 3-9. They got their ass kicked yesterday. I have no idea what has happened down there.
I'm a huge Jeff Grimes guy. I mean, we know it. I've talked about it plenty of times. I love their scheme. I love the way they run. You talk about 2 years ago when they just move a linebacker over to running back and he becomes 1,000-yard back just because of a lot of the way they set that up and the way they blocked it. But I couldn't agree more, Eddie. Like, how do you justify, okay, we're Oklahoma, we're going to the SEC, and we're going to hire a guy that just got fired at Baylor? Like, you're going to see stuff like, Greg Schiano to Tennessee or Mark Stoops to A&M. Like, people will revolt. And I get it because to me, from a football perspective, I think Jeff Grimes could be really, really good at Oklahoma. I really believe that. At the same time, I understand the fan base not accepting that as, we need a guy with momentum. There needs to be a guy that is on the right trajectory, not just fired from a school that, 2 years ago, Oklahoma was thinking about taking their head coach away after he, won a Big 12 title. It's just not the same math.
I was looking for the questions.
Oh, it's a lot of just people saying, no, I don't want that guy hired.
Well, I think that Brent is probably going to go back through the YouTube comments and he'll check off some of the names before he interviews them.
Oh, for sure.
Just
he's definitely watching this right now.
Just to make sure.
There's a lot of big fans of my Jeff Grimes take. That really got everybody very excited.
Got Gabe Eichert, someone that said him.
I think Gabe should do it.
Yeah.
And he's a little bit of a coward that he hasn't stepped up and said that he will be the offense coordinator yet.
What about Dana Holgorsen?
What do you guys think of Sean Lewis? Go ahead, George. Yeah, you wanted him.
I love Sean Lewis. I want to talk about.
He was fantastic at Kent State, and then I think that a lot of the stuff that has happened in Boulder this year probably out of his control. It's not his fault. So Tim Brewster got off that train by way of basically, I think, resigning his post.
I would hire Sean Lewis tomorrow.
Really?
Yep.
Yeah. I think he is one of the best offensive coaches in the country.
Is that something that I wonder if Brent Venables would be up for it? Now, he coached against him, right?
Last year.
Kent State came to Norman.
I don't
and
know
I
if
know
they
that
have
he was
any-
pretty complimentary of him the week of the game, if I remember correctly.
Yeah. I'm looking to see what his exact background is.
Yeah, there's a connection, and I'm forgetting what it is right now, but they're absolutely I'm with George. You hired Sean Lewis tomorrow. I don't think anybody could complain. I thought he did an outstanding job.
He played at Wisconsin and then coached high school for a couple years, and then was at Nebraska, Omaha, then Akron, Eastern Illinois, Bowling Green, Syracuse, Kent State, Colorado. So he is a Midwest
I think
guy.
it must be the Syracuse Clemson thing is what I like. They've coached against each other a considerable amount.
He was the co-OC and quarterbacks coach at Syracuse 2016 to 2017, which I think that's when Syracuse was pretty good.
Yeah, I want to. Let's see. One of those years would have been the year that they beat Deshaun Watson at Clemson.
That sounds right.
No, I'm thinking of Pitt. Syracuse gave them a run, but I don't think they actually beat them that year.
They were blown out by Clemson in the 2016 season 54-0. So I'm sure Brent's like, yeah. I remember that.
Some real good memories there, right?
Oh, but in 2017,
Love that guy.
when he was the OC and quarterbacks coach, they beat number 2 Clemson in 2017.
Damn it. I should have trusted myself.
So you were right. So anyways, he's obviously gone up against Brent a few times. He's a young guy. I think he's, oh gosh, how old is he? I have it right here. 37. So relatively young. I think he's a pretty good recruiter. And again, what happened in Colorado this year is just
A little bit out of his control, I'm sure.
yes. Yeah, I would definitely say so.
Well, guys, look at the way that when he left Kent State, the way the Power Five just ripped apart that roster. Like that, Dante Cephas is at Penn State. The quarterback kid that played against Oklahoma, whose name I'm going to escape, he went out to UCLA under Chip Kelly. Like there was a lot of talent that people saw on that roster. And you talk to people, and I'm certainly not one of them. This is me absolutely aggregating information on a on a live feed here. But when you talk to people that know the MAC, they'll tell you Kent State's one of the absolute worst funded, worst supported. Like there is not a lot there. And he was putting them in a position to compete in that conference, year in and year out. And I think a big part of that was him, his play calling. You couldn't hit it much more out of the park than Sean Lewis to me. I think he'd be unbelievable for Jackson Arnold. I think he'd bring a lot of creativity to the offense.
Drew wants to know why nobody's talking about Joe Brady.
Didn't he just get promoted as the Bills OC? Or am I?
Did he take over for Dorsey?
Hold on.
I don't remember.
Yeah, I'm pulling it up myself. Guys, I think the biggest thing is, and probably part of the reason I don't pay much attention to Joe Brady, I don't think Joe Brady likes to recruit. I don't think he loves being a college coach.
And just knowing how recruiting works these days, I don't blame him one bit. I think you got to be a little bit crazy to get into the college football game these days.
He is an NFL guy. From everything I've heard about him, Josh, and I heard about him when I was covering the Broncos as a potential offensive coordinator there at one point. He is 1,000%, I think, sticking in the NFL. And now that he's the interim with the Bills, and they won, I think, last week when he was his first time being the OC there, I wouldn't be shocked if he ends up keeping that job in Buffalo.
And I will say there are some people, depending on who you talk to, that felt like Brent extended some interest to him at the time of his hiring is a possibility instead of Lebby. He was one of the few OC names I remember hearing. And I I don't know if it was fully unreturned, but I never heard it went very far. So I, kind of in that same line of thinking.
Here's an interesting question if we want to get back to Lebby a little bit. What's the ceiling for Jeff Lebby at Mississippi State? Because I look at that job as a really difficult job to win quickly. And from what I understand, that's kind of how he sold it. He thinks that he's going to be able to turn over that roster pretty quickly and maybe win as soon as next year. I don't know. I mean, that's a really tough job in the SEC, and I think Jeff's a pretty darn good coach, but I don't know, man. It's going to be a really tough gig.
I think it's a really tough job. Just in terms of what I don't know about anything at Mississippi State, it just seems like Mike Leach was such a perfect fit for that thing. And what is successful to the people of Starkville? I truly don't know. Like, I don't think that they're going to be winning double-digit.
The goal for Jeff is to get bowl eligible the first couple years, be bowl eligible, and then have one of those seasons where you win 9-10 games, you exceed expectations.
Surprise everybody, sneak into a 12-team playoff, that type of deal.
Something like that, and then you get the next job.
Yeah.
Because this isn't I don't view this as a long-term.
And that's why initially I didn't really think that
yeah.
this was going to be the call, but I do think that there's some comfort there with Zach, obviously, as the athletic director. There's some comfort in getting an SEC job. You just don't turn those down normally. I think that real quick, we can maybe want to get into this. I think that there's going to be a lot of people out there that look at Jeff Lebby on the move, and I know that there's a narrative out there right now that like this was always going to happen after our Bryles incident. I don't get that case. The people that I've talked to, I think Jeff was extremely happy in Norman. I think he was more than happy to sign back up next year. Have you guys heard anything like that this was going to always be out there, that Jeff Lebby was going to move on from Oklahoma at the end of the year? I don't get that feeling at all.
No, not for me. And I talked to, and obviously you guys don't know who I'm referencing here, but I talked to some people close to Lebby, and I didn't get the impression he was sore about anything. I didn't get the impression that he was unhappy. He liked working with Brent. I know there was a lot of respect for just the way Brent handles things, being a very direct guy to work for, and just being, one of the things I can say is you talk to people around Lebby and they'll tell you how much he appreciated Brent. Brent is who he says he is, guys. Like, and you guys know it, but like you always heard that from people around Lebby. Like, there's nothing fake here. There's no facade. Like, this is the guy he is, and I just think Lebby respected that a lot. So I honestly, guys, I would say probably after the BYU game, I kind of put to bed any idea that he was going to leave. I thought, okay, here it goes. Next year they'll have Jackson Arnold, and he'll try to really run one off maybe for another 2 years. And then kind of like I was talking about earlier, then you might really have your chance to do something after, 2 straight big-time quarterbacks come through under Jeff Lebby.
And I was told kind of on Wednesday, Eddie, that, I think that this kind of came out of the blue to Jeff. Like, not that he knew he was a candidate, but I don't think there was an expectation he was going to be offered the job. And I know that, Mississippi State had several other candidates that they were very interested in, including Chadwell at Liberty, who I think actually ended up turning them down. And we'll see what job maybe he gets. But no, I think Jeff wanted to stay in Norman. But when an SEC head coaching job comes open, you don't pass it up. I think that's kind of the reality of it. And it's, whether we think it's a great job or not, those opportunities don't just come along every day. And so I'm sure Jeff's viewed it as, this isn't something that he can sit on and hope that, another one comes open next year. And he knows, I think it also helps that he knows the athletic director. I mean, Zach Selman was a part of the hiring process for him at Oklahoma. He was in on those interviews back when Brent Venables was hired, helped hire Brent Venables, and then helped hire Brent Venables' staff. So the familiarity, he's lived in Mississippi before, obviously, when he coached at Ole Miss, so he kind of knows the area. It just made a lot of sense for him at the end of the day.
And I just go back to this idea. You can't turn down an SEC job.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I did want to say, talking to a few people, I was interested. There is a longer standing relationship between Selman and Lebby than I realized. dating back to kind of like college days. From some of the people I talked to, I think there was kind of some mutual friends that had bound them at different points in their college time. So these are two guys that are very familiar with each other.
I know that it was something that you mentioned earlier in the program, George, but will there be any other coaching staff shakeups in Norman here moving forward? And we can move past the offensive side of the ball. I think we said our piece there. Is there anything going to happen on the defensive side of the ball? Is anybody else going to be targeted? Is anybody going to be looking to leave? Is anybody going to simply retire at the end of this season?
Who could you possibly be talking about?
Well, maybe like the linebacker coach. I say that in thinking I know that he was on. I don't know what his contract situation was, but Ted Roof, as I understand it, he doesn't have a contract after this year.
Correct. It is up, I believe, at the start of 2024. So we'll see. I have no idea, honestly. I haven't really checked around on that. It wouldn't surprise me if Ted Roof retires at the end of the year. I think he might make that decision after the bowl game, and we'll see where OU ends up in that. But if Ted Roof were to retire, it would be really interesting to see if Brent, a lot of talk about James Skalski, who played linebacker at Clemson for him, is really highly thought of the young guys. He's a recent grad. I think he's only 26 maybe years old. So be a young guy. I'm sure he would be great at recruiting. Or do you go out and you get somebody experienced? Ted Roof, as much as people want to say Ted Roof does nothing, I think he is somewhat of a, I don't know, just a right-hand man to Brent, I guess. I don't think he does a whole lot on the recruiting trail. Josh could probably speak to that. But I do think he has been somewhat of a sounding board, maybe, is the right term for Brent. But I also wonder if you can go out and get somebody really, really good at that linebacker spot that can recruit his ass off and also help develop those guys. Even though Brent basically coaches the linebackers.
That's such a... I mean, and again, there's a reason Brent has recruited and done so well at that position for, 2 decades now. It's a high energy role. Like the linebackers coaches are almost always just wound up, very high wire kind of type guys. And, I think it's funny. I was having this conversation with somebody yesterday. One of the guys that Oklahoma really missed in the 2024 class was Peyton Pierce, the linebacker out of Lovejoy, the guy that, I think everybody, and certainly including myself, thought was going to be part of this class for Oklahoma. And talking to some people, I think he just kind of fell in love with James Laurinaitis at Ohio State. And again, young guy, very active, very energetic, and that's not to say Ted Roof can't be a good recruiter, but so much of what we heard about Roof was, okay, he's going to recruit Georgia and he's going to have those relationships. Oklahoma never even got a visit out of Sammy Brown. Like an official visit never happened. Like at some point you've got to kind of look at that and see what that means. And, again, I think everybody who's listened to me for long enough kind of knows my feelings on that situation, but it's not Ruffin McNeil, but there is a part of me that's like, there is what is he bringing to this equation? And does it justify what someone else could do to take at least a couple of the things off of Brent Venable's plate, however he wanted to do that? And then, do you make, and, obviously Skalski's not going to become the defensive coordinator, but do you elevate, do Todd Bates and Brandon Hall become your co-DCs? I mean, you could do some things where you reward guys who are doing really well and at the same time elevate either a young guy like Skalski or find that linebacker coach that Brent is ready to hire.
It will be really interesting moving forward. And as we said, I mean, this is a massive hire for, I think, all the known reasons, and especially with what you have in the quarterback room. And then you're going to probably have to go back out and, moving to the SEC, it just feels like everything is kind of inflated right now with everything in the program. You're getting ready to, start kind of a new era of Oklahoma football, if you will. And that's why it was so important for Oklahoma to get to 10 wins this year. That's why it was so important to just really, truly take that next step as a program for whatever that thing was 2 years ago in Brent's first year.
Think about this. This next month is maybe the most important month of the Brent Venables era since he's been here in terms of you need to close on signing day with some of these guys. You got to go out and hire an offensive coordinator. Like I said, maybe the most important, coach on staff other than the head coach. And then, you've got the transfer portal opens up now in a week or so. You got guys that you want to try and convince to come back, and Billy Bowman, Danny Stutzman, and others. So this is a huge this month of December is going to be massive. Lots of news to go around too. So it's going to be kind of fun to watch, see how OU kind of handles it, because this is pivotal. This next month.
No, it is. It's a good time to join Soonerscoop.com too, and for YouTube viewers out there, if you're watching this on YouTube and want to join Soonerscoop.com, $1 for 2 months subscription, which is a rather kind offering during the holiday season. 2 months, $1. That's literally 4 quarters. I think you can afford that. Just in terms of moving forward here over the next couple weeks, I know that the offense coordinator stuff's going to be interesting. Josh, it is early signing period just around the corner. We've talked about some of the what you would say is the upper echelon guys in the 2024 class. The Devon Mitchell news was obviously very good. You've talked to the quarterbacks. We've mentioned that. Is there any late movement that you would think that will come here, whether it be players or just recruits, in terms of maybe opting out of the 2024 class if they were as tight with Jeff Lebby? Is there anything right now? Would you just say it's kind of it would be a big surprise?
I mean, do I just say Williams Nwaneri's name as often as humanly possible in a short amount of time, just to get the, like I said,
make
get the
sure that there's a
algorithm
link.
In,
Make sure there's a link so we can make money off of it.
Absolutely. No, I think this now. There's going to be 1 or 2 guys. There's going to be something that'll happen, because it always does. It's just like a college football Saturday that you expect to be sleepy. There's always one game that comes out of nowhere, and I think that'll happen. You'll see something that surprises even me. Like there's stuff to watch. We're going to keep an eye on. I went and saw Tyler Mercer, kind of one of their later offensive line targets right now. And I think I saw him on Saturday in Dallas, and I think that's going to be a situation to continue to watch. But do I see anything that is just setting up red flags? Not really. Oklahoma, a lot of the hay is in the barn here. I mean, they really have done a nice job. There's not a lot of guys that are wavering. Obviously the defensive class is pretty much put to bed. And, when you consider what a large portion that is of this class, not only from a headliner standpoint with David Stone and Daniel Okoye, Nigel Smith, all those big name guys, but also from a number standpoint, there's a lot of bodies on that side of the ball. So without much really changing there and Oklahoma closing strong, there's ample reason to think that they're going to be just fine as far as holding this class together. And offensively, I talked to some of the offensive linemen. We mentioned Devon Mitchell already. We've talked to the quarterback. Like I said, there's a story up on Sooner Scoop right now that you can read. And those guys all seem pretty confident in what's happening, what's going to be fine going forward. If one guy took a look around, maybe that's a possibility. But what's interesting about this change, Jeff Lebby is not only the offensive coordinator, but also the quarterback's coach, guys. There's not a lot of places that anybody is going to see as Oklahoma's equal for a quarterback that are going to have an opening for a quarterback like Brendan Zurbrugg or Michael Hawkins at this point in time. Like that just doesn't exist. So Oklahoma is really it's for either one of those guys. And I want to say again, Brendan Zurbrugg was very, very adamant. As long as Brent Venables is there, I'm in Norman. Like that was pretty much what he had to say. With Hawkins, it hasn't been as clear cut, but I don't think there's anything really to worry about there. I think he wants to see who's hired. You can see Seth Luttrell in the background here. I think that would absolutely be one that makes some sense for him. I think there's a relationship there that could work. And if that's the case, then I think Oklahoma's fine. And if not, Michael Hawkins, again, with what I'm saying, with the timeline of recruiting and where things are at, he's not only going to have to go through the process again at a very rapid rate, but he's going to have to do it and probably pick a place that is not of Oklahoma's caliber, just because, Ohio State, Texas, those guys have their quarterbacks. Like there's no there's no spot to jump into at most of these elite programs.
I would also say, Josh, I remember thinking back to the camps this summer when Kevin Sperry was there every single day. Seth Luttrell was working with the quarterbacks during those camps. I mean, he was somebody that was very involved talking to a lot of the guys. So I think that his relationship with several guys, obviously already on campus, but also the recruits, I think is pretty strong, which again kind of gives him the leg up in this offensive coordinator search. Again, we'll see if Seth even wants that. I wouldn't be shocked if Seth's up for other jobs elsewhere. But if he wants the job, it just feels like it's gonna be him. But again, we'll see. Maybe Brent opens it up and looks elsewhere. But yeah, we also have some people in here asking, is Seth Luttrell's offense slower? What's the difference between what Seth does versus Jeff Lebby? I know me and Carrie, shout out Carrie Murdoch, by the way, producing this show. We need to give him a shout out, Eddie. He has. Why are you grinning like that?
I just didn't know we were kissing people's asses today.
Well, he does.
We appreciate Carrie and everything
write my
that
checks.
He's doing.
But Carrie and I were talking about it, and Seth. There we go. Seth does run the air raid versus Lebby's doing the spread. Josh, you're our X's and O's guy. I mean, I think I asked you this maybe at the beginning of the show, but let's talk about it again because we have about almost 2,000 people now watching, so more people from earlier. But what is the differences, I guess, from Luttrell versus Lebby?
I think so much of it you're going to see, again, a lot of people are going to be familiar with the spread principles. I mean, you're talking about a lot of the same stuff that you saw Lincoln Riley do. Now, we watched Lincoln evolve, and that's what's going to be interesting to me with Luttrell, if he were to be the choice. How has he taken some of the things he saw? Because, I mean, again, even at North Texas, he worked with Graham Harrell for quite some time, who we know is absolutely a spread proponent and kind of the third generation of these spread guys. But with Lebby, you're going to see, and I know people are going to say, oh, this is great. There's not as much of the jet sweep. There's not as much lateral movement. They don't stretch you in the same way laterally. Now, that's not to say that they don't. I mean, they do. RPO almost, with the, and you can call it used to be the Art Briles offense. Everybody kind of got leery of that and, call it whatever you want to. But I think this is something that one of the things I liked about Lebby's offense, a little more run heavy than the spread can often be. And I thought that was something that even with Lincoln Riley, who was a little bit more of a run guy than a lot of these spread proponents, you would see it at times where he would get away from it in unnecessary times where he thought, okay, just run the ball here, Lincoln. Let's just run clock. Let's work that through. At the same time, those guys are kind of pass oriented, but at the same time, what I know of Luttrell, that wasn't one of his big problems. He was a guy that was more than willing to run the ball. Obviously, a former fullback. I mean, he has an appreciation for the ground game and what that can mean. So I think what you see is a lot of the differences are subtle. And I know that when Lebby came in and I talked to some of the people around the program, they would tell you, oh, no, you can block this similarly. You can do very similar things. So I don't think it's a drastic change that couldn't be coped with over the course of the next year as Oklahoma gets ready for the 2024 season. But there are absolutely, I mean, the calls are going to be different. They're going to do some different things. But what you do like about Seth Luttrell being there is he's familiar with the terminology. So even if he wants to change some of the nomenclature, some of the way they call things, some of the audibles, at the same time, he knows what Jackson Arnold's been doing, and he can marry that to what his thoughts are, what his principles are, and kind of make that all work rather than a new guy who doesn't have any basis in that and kind of has to really just kind of start everybody from scratch as Lebby did, 20 months ago now.
Can Seth Luttrell recruit? We got that question in the chat as well. And, I think his time at North Texas would tell you he's probably got some pretty good ties in the DFW area, which obviously Oklahoma is recruiting pretty heavily.
Yeah, I would expect Luttrell to be a very good recruiter because obviously, like you said, it's time at North Texas. You very much believe that he is a guy that has a lot of relationships down there. And I know he does. You talk to coaches around there, there was a respect for him. And a lot of times guys like that come from the smaller programs, they've spent time with everybody. It hasn't just been, they stopped by Duncanville and DeSoto. And, like they had to recruit everywhere. They had to know every program because they needed the random 3-star kid as much as they weren't going to get the 5-star guy. So they had to build relationships with everybody from the head coach to the running backs coach or whoever it may be. So I think there would be a lot of interest from a lot of guys for Luttrell to take that job. And we know that was one of the things I thought Brent really hit out of the park with his first staff was how well they were situated in the Dallas area with guys like Jay Valai and Finley. I mean, and Lebby as well. I mean, there was a lot there. There was a lot of guys that knew that area really, really well, and it's paid off. I mean, we've seen, Peyton Bowe and Jackson Arnold. You run down the list. Oklahoma's done a great job in Dallas over the last couple of years. So I do. I think Seth Luttrell would be fine in that way. Again, it's a little bit of an unknown because when you look at his track record, guys, this isn't a guy. I mean, he really spent 2 years at a program that you could consider at all comparable to the way Oklahoma recruits, and that's North Carolina. I mean, Arizona, no. Indiana, no. North Carolina doesn't recruit at Oklahoma's level, but from time to time, they are involved with guys that are on, that kind of high elite Power 5 level. So he has some ability with it, but again, it's been 10 years, so I think it's going to be more about relationships, and I do think Seth Luttrell has those, particularly in very specific areas, and North Texas most notably.
Very good. George, we have anything we want to wrap up from the chat rooms?
I don't think so. We've been going for an hour.
Yeah.
I feel like this was good.
No, I think it was. And it certainly, I don't think was necessarily surprising. I think that's why this thing's so much different than, because I'm happy for Jeff. I'm happy for him to get the opportunity, with Mississippi State. And it's going to be kind of interesting to see which way Oklahoma goes. The good thing is they got really good options. They have a really, really good future at quarterback. I think we all three feel like with Jackson Arnold. And now they kind of enter this mode where you're 10-2, and you're going to find out what bowl game you're going to. We can probably get into that on Monday afternoon when we're right back here on the Soonerscoop.com YouTube page. Josh will be joining us about your travels over the last couple days. Got the high school football playoffs in full swing here in the state of Oklahoma. I'm going to get out to see a bunch of that over the next week. And, I mean, it sucks that BYU couldn't do their job. Maybe kind of tells you about what the direction of that whole religion is like. Just kidding. But, we'll see. We'll see. OSU and Texas headed for a Big 12 championship game coming up on Saturday in Arlington.
Also, shout out to the people that were in the Super Chat. I don't know if you saw that, Eddie. Grimlock, of course, in the Super Chat.
OG.
We got to shout out Grimlock. John Schlegel. Shout out John, and some guy named JB.
All right. Very good.
So we appreciate those folks.
Yeah. I don't think he's too qualified. Ian Boyd is too qualified to be the offensive coordinator at Oklahoma.
He'd probably run the program into the ground.
One guy, and it's strictly an homage to Kerry Murdoch because I know how much he hates people interrupting each other. But I interrupted George twice as he tried to go in on Dana Holgerson a little bit. So, George, floor is yours. I promise not to interrupt.
No, I don't think Dana Holgerson is a candidate, but it's just fun to think about. Yeah,
good news for the bands because I do think he makes the band play quite a bit. It'd be better news, though, for Riverwind.
It would be fun. The press conference would be electric.
Well, maybe that should be one of the things that the new offense coordinator has to agree to is that he'll meet with us.
Oh, gosh. Don't even get me started.
At least once a week during game weeks for no more than 15 minutes.
That seems fair. I mean, like that I think that's only right. I mean, guys, I'll step out. He can be in the middle of the 3 box here, and you two can talk to him. Well, I think that's perfect.
Very good.
I've got nothing else.
Yeah, no, I think it's I think that's a good place to stop. We will be back here on Soonerscoop.com's YouTube page. Josh, we appreciate it. Are you going to sign back up with us tomorrow afternoon, if that's good for you?
Absolutely. I'll be here. Guys, we should have known news was going to happen today. I am yet again, much like the Lincoln Riley day, I had to pick up our Christmas tree today.
Oh,
so
beautiful.
anytime I
Real?
am doing Christmas festivities, what's that?
Do you go real?
Oh yeah, real.
Real Christmas tree.
Yeah, oh yeah. We're
What a
real
lovely
family.
smell that
yeah,
brings.
that's yeah, that you and I want to say, and I'm honestly setting this up for myself. If you see any white on me, I don't have awful dandruff. I mean, I may, but that's not what this is related to. We have a flocked tree, so I was in it trying to set it up in our tree stand, and there's a fair amount of white. I was covered earlier. It looked like it had snowed in Houston for quite some time.
We have one quick final super chat.
That the same could be said for maybe Dana Holgerson's house tonight after getting fired.
Oh God. We have one final super chat question that I think we should answer because this guy donated a good chunk of money here.
Okay, what is it?
Brian the Boken asks, better splash OC hire, Willie Korn or Brennan Marion?
Those are two great options, aren't they? I might go Brennan Marion just because of the Oklahoma connection, but the Willie Korn thing is intriguing. I mean, Liberty all they've done is move the football up and down the field.
Yeah. They're both young.
Yeah, I would have to go with Marion. Now, I will say I love Chadwell's offense. Like I would love a guy from that tree. I think that's really interesting. I think he's really creative in what he does. At the same time, Marion, Willie Korn has no real connection to the area. Now, that's not to say that he couldn't do it and be fine. I just think Marion is a little bit of an easier fit. And again, there's ways that are very easy for Oklahoma to kind of check in on him because there's a lot of Oklahoma connection at UNLV. There's a lot of, honestly, in some ways, there's a lot of connectivity between UNLV and OU itself, not just the state. So I think that's something where they could really have a good feel for him coming in and kind of what they wanted to do.
One other name that was thrown out there that we probably haven't talked about, and I don't even know if it would be a real situation, Joey Halzle.
The way, kind of like what we're talking about with Jeff Grimes, the way the first year has gone for Tennessee with Joey Halzle. I mean, Alex Golesh did such a great job, obviously got it there at South Florida and has done a nice job kind of getting them up off the mat. But Tennessee's offense has been pretty shaky this year. Yeah. I mean, it's really been a team that's been carried by its defense. I think it would be hard for a lot of people to accept that hire. Even obviously, you know, we talk about connections. Obviously, Joey played at Oklahoma. There's a lot of goodwill there, or I guess there should be. You wonder how the Heupel situation carries itself.
What about Lincoln Riley? He might be out of a job soon.
Watch your mouth. That son of a bitch. No, I don't think that's an option right now. We can move past Sharon Moore too, right? Like his next gig is going to be.
I think he's be the head coach of Michigan.
He could be the head coach at Michigan. If something were to happen to Jim Harbaugh, he could be the head coach somewhere else, I would imagine. I just don't think that he'd go from the offensive coordinator at Michigan to Norman where, you know, it just doesn't seem like that's a right fit.
I think he'll be the head coach at Michigan next year.
I agree.
Like I think that's happening.
You guys have both been adamant that Jim Harbaugh is on the way out.
I think he'll be at the Chicago Bears next year.
Huh? Oh, Bob Przybylo, rejoice.
The poor Bears.
Shout out, Bob.
The Bears are so bad. God bless them.
Oh.
All right, boys. We appreciate it. We appreciate everybody for joining us here on the Soonerscoop.com YouTube page. Just as a short reminder, a little bit of a reminder, if you're looking to join Sooner Scoop, subscribe now. 2 months for $1. That is a promo code OU1. The OU and the number 1, OU1, for anybody that is interested in joining Soonerscoop.com. 2 months, $1. Great holiday play. There you see it right there on the screen. OU1, $1, 2 months. Seems like that would be a rather easy sell for you. We appreciate everybody for joining us, though. Jeff Lebby headed to Mississippi State, and we will be back on Monday.